My name is Raphael Fischler. I'm here at McGill in a field unrelated to Judaic studies or global anti-Semitism, urban planning, but still Charles asked me to be a convener of this series here, and I'd like to introduce Charles Small, who is the head of ISCAP, the organization that is putting this seminar series together, as you know. And I'm very glad that you could be here tonight. I'd like to introduce our guest, with whom I have a geographic and semi-personal relationship. We knew of each other 30-some years ago. We were in rival youth movements, HaShomer HaTzair, HaNoar HaTzioni, Antwerp, Brussels, Antwerp. So good evening to other Belgians who may be here. And it's a pleasure to welcome someone who was actually close in many ways in my youth. Joël studied at ULB, at the Free University of Brussels, and at Sciences Po in Paris, and he actually is a professor of political science at ULB, at the Free University of Brussels, and a lecturer at Sciences Po, and it's a great honor to have him. He's a historian of anti-Semitism, also quoted by other historians of that period, of the war and so on. And he does research on anti-Semitism, on genocide, but as well on European integration and nationalism today. And we're very happy that he could come all the way from Europe to speak to us tonight. So welcome, please.
Thank you very much, Raphael. Thank you very much, Charles. I'm very honored to be here. It's really a pleasure. I love Montreal to be here several times. It's one of my favorite cities. So, unfortunately, I'm a francophone, fortunately. So it's not my native language, English. So if you allow me, I will read my paper, but I will try to read it as, to make you understand what I'm going to say, because we don't have a lot of time, and I think it's better to get straight almost immediately. And the topic is quite complex, quite difficult. And so, my paper, it's called Pragmatic Antisemitism, and as I said to Charles, I'm trying to explain how you could be, or develop an anti-Semitic policy without being actually an anti-Semite. But I think we have to separate anti-Semitism, let's say maybe policy, behavior, and maybe anti-Semitic opinion. And one good example is, for instance, Pierre Laval, who used to be Prime Minister of Pétain during the Second World War. In the 30s, he was maybe pro-Jewish. He had no trouble at all with the Jews. And you know that in 1941, 1942, he followed German policy, and he's the one who actually gave the children to be sent to Auschwitz. And so his policy was anti-Semitic, but I don't think actually that he was. So this is what we call, this is what my master used to call the policy of the lesser evil. If to say my compatriots, I have to give up the Jews, why don't I do it? This is maybe what seems to be the case in my beloved country.
It's actually the policy
Brussels.
of least resistance.
Maybe, okay.
Not like
And he asked me, the gentleman, if I was a francophone. I'm born in Ghent, so I'm born in Flanders, but more or less I'm a francophone, because my parents used to speak English like many people here, and they decided to brought me in French, because then the French was the leading part of Belgium, now it's a country. They make a bad mistake, because I don't know English, unfortunately, but you are the son of your parents now.
Do you also speak Flemish?
Not so well, but I do read it, yes, definitely. So, Anti-Zionism, this is the title of my topic, a civic religion. And the topic of today will be the troubling case of Belgium. So let's start. So, since 2001, Belgium witnessed a sudden rise in anti-Semitic incidents, the worst year since 1945. On 28 January 2011, the Belgian weekly magazine Le Vif l'Express had published a lengthy report on the Jewish community in Belgium, which described the Jewish community growing concern resulting from the marked increase of anti-Semitism in Belgium. Yet, Belgium has not become the anti-Semitic country that certain people believe it ought to be denounced as to the rest of the world. Belgian Jews face absolutely no discrimination. Yet, one should be worried at the brusque liberation of anti-Semitic discourse. I don't know if brusque is English. Yes, do you understand? Brusque. Certainly, good. Brusque liberation of anti-Semitic discourse. From Catholic circles to the extreme right, passing through a large part of the left, diverse groups take advantage of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to liberate anti-Semitic discourse. Antisemitism has reached the mainstream of Belgian society. Taboos that has been in place since World War II are being totally broken. Let me give you two examples that I suppose Raphael knows. Some months ago, a comedian called Goebbels, I don't invent it, Goebbels, said that the Holocaust could not happen again because the Jews are much smarter. They have spread across the world, try rounding them up. Most are in America, so you cannot send them by train to Germany to die in gas chamber. It was supposed to be fun. On June 16, 2011, the Flemish regional newspaper Zwinkrant distributing Knock, you know, it's the Deauville of Belgium. Huh? It used to be, it's not that it used to be. So Knock, I don't know what will be the equivalent here in Canada, maybe Miami, Florida. Published an anti-Semitic column entitled Red Squirrel, which declares that Jews are no longer welcome in Belgium. According to the unknown author, there are similarities between Jews, Israeli, and Nazis. Jews occupy Palestine as well as the Belgian coast. I quote, "Have you ever tried to make a scroll in May on the Knock promenade? It seems that the whole diaspora troops has flocked together. Men with their curls, their funny aprons and black hats. The women wear rings and long stockings. The whole world belongs to them. Do they make way for you? No way. We are the choosing people they serve. And then they wonder why we can't stand them." End of the quote. Anti-Zionist propaganda used to legitimate anti-Semitic position is now disseminated in Belgium. And before I will develop this idea, let me make an important remark. Of course, it is not necessarily anti-Semitic to criticize Israel or Zionism, even if the criticism is harsh or unfair. Compare Israel to Nazi Germany, of course, is anti-Semitic, not to apartheid South Africa, even if the comparison is absurd. Anti-Zionism should be considered as anti-Semitic when the criticism is visceral, unproportionate, unfair, phantasmatic. That's why usually when I write, I prefer to write radical anti-Semitism instead of anti-Zionism, instead of anti-Zionism. So let's try to explain the phenomenon of anti-Semitism in Belgium. The failure of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process could only be a part of the explanation. The anti-Israeli passion, according to me, there is no other word to describe the current hostility toward the Jewish state, is far too big to be explained only by external factors, such as the conflict itself. Nevertheless, let's assume that the statu quo policy of the Israeli government doesn't help at all. Obviously, Belgian attitude toward Israel and even now toward Judaism are much more influenced by internal factors, according to me. So what are those internal factors? The first one is what I call the Catholic Habitus, and I will show you some examples. Because I'm working also, I work a lot of images and representation. So what is the Catholic Habitus, which gave the Jews the role of the scapegoat, and which dates back to the Middle Age? The Jew being responsible of the world misfortunes, plague, cholera, and infanticide. This is very important, and of course of wars. Well, the second phenomenon, the second factor is the radical left habitus, dating back to the Middle Age, which associated the Jew with money, and then capitalism, now symbolized by the United States. David Nuremberg demonstrated that it was in the 12th century that revolutionary anti-Judaism appeared in Europe. This strange facet of anti-Semitism that makes the Jew out to be the exploiter by excellence. And I would say that, furthermore, since the disappearance of the working class in our postmodern society, the Arab migrants are often considered as a new suffering class. I would say the substitute of the famishing proletarian class. So third factor, a difficult relation with the Holocaust, especially in Flanders, where a certain percentage of nationalists did collaborate with the Nazis. So anti-Zionism is there an easy way to forget, forgive, or trivialize Flemish collaborationism. Fourth factor, the emergence based on the intifada of the banlieue, this is the French word, the neighborhood intifada, of the Arab Muslim Judeophobia, which holds that the Jew should be firstly considered as dhimmi, second-class citizen, and secondly, as responsible for all the wrongs of the Arab world. In Belgium, a few organizations with undemocratic ideologies are active on the political scene, including, we have Islamist parties now in Belgium, and more recently Égalité, a Marxist Islamist party, inspired by the French humorist Antisemitism. Dieudonné come often in Montreal, unfortunately. He's quite popular in this country. So, according to me, we have to add more factors to those ones. 3 other factors that doesn't concern a priori the Jew must be added for being as, if not more important. The first one is the difficulty of the Belgians to dealing with their own colonial past. The silence around the violence perpetrated by the Belgian colonizer against the Congolese is astonishing. This amnesia is compensated by a feeling of guilt towards the third world and the temptation to turn aside the emotive charge of colonialism by a radical critique of, you know what, of Israel. Israel, the state of the Jewish people, towards whom the Belgians have also a sense of guilt. As my friend Georges Bensoussan, who may be now the most important Jewish historian in France, as my friend Georges Bensoussan said, the European blames us for the evil they did to us. Within this vision, Israel is of course presented as a white state. 6 factors. A certain dose of pragmatism. Above all, Belgium is a pragmatic country. As a former leading exporter per capita, Belgium must above all consider its commercial interests, which drive to a morality of variable geometry. What does it mean? It means acts of compassion tied in with geopolitics. Economically, it is far less dangerous to have a moral stand on Israel, Taiwan, Nepal, and Rwanda, than China, Qatar, or Russia. 7 points. Belgium is engaged in a post-modernity crisis. And the question, you know, it's maybe like a less more than Canada. Would it survive its national contradiction? You know, the trouble between Flemish and Francophone, etc. Personally, I doubt it. For 15 years, I speak about the death of Belgium. Well, you will see. So, Brussels is engaged in a postmodern crisis within the context of new demographic trends, the decline of Belgian Jewry, and the formidable dynamism of the community of Muslim origin, which make up around 25% of the population in the Brussels metropolitan region. Brussels is already the Western capital with the highest percentage of persons from Muslim origin or professing the Muslim religion. Population projections show that in about 2030, Islam will be the first religion in Brussels, not Belgium, Brussels, the capital of Belgium in Europe. The majority are naturalized Belgian or are Belgian by birth. Thus, some 23% of Brussels regional MPs are originated from the Muslim world, mostly from Morocco and a bit less from Turkey. I'm also working in the Brussels regional parliament, so I'm dealing every day with those MPs. And you have to know that in the Brussels regional parliament, the socialist group mainly consists of members stemming from Morocco. 60% of the socialist MPs are Moroccans or Turks. All those factors combine to marginalize the Jews in Belgium. Well, they just demographically don't count anymore. And to transform Israel into the ideal scapegoat nation, a role traditionally awarded to the Jew since the lower Middle Age. To lead the Jew has always been a tactic that works. This unconscious record of the policy of the lesser evil, as I said in my introduction, explain largely the formidable resurgence of Judeophobia among rightists, Catholic as well as progressists. This habitus has a long tradition in the Middle Age. Rather than fighting armed infidels in the Holy Land, many crusaders choose to kill unarmed Jews instead. In the 19th century, rather than attack the true leader of finance, it was for the financier Jew that Proudhon or Karl Lueger in Vienna would reserve the stings of their criticism. today, instead of attacking Turkey, well, it was the Turks, Kurds, Morocco, China, Russia, or even the United States, one preferred to attack Israel for its human rights violations. By a subtle mechanism of transferal of animosity, the Jewish state has become the figure which substitutes for the rest of the world, and especially the United States, a superpower which is far harder to affront. In this case, the special relationship between Israel and the United States, of course, will help naturally. If one is to believe the main columnist of Wallonia, Flanders, and of Brussels, the three regions, all the frustration of the Arab world are a result of the non-resolution of the Palestinian question, and this from Morocco to Indonesia. By its arrogance, by its powerfulness, Israel, which is one of the smallest states on the planet, constitutes the main threat to the peace of the world. From there, the Israeli becomes the Jews of nightmares, a dark medieval nightmare, the one who crucified Christ, and today the Palestinian people, the one that endangers children, of course Palestinian children, and the usurer who plots against peace. No other conflicts command such attention in Belgian press, political class, university, NGOs, etc. And recently, one of the most influential Flemish columnists, Luc van der Kelen, is extremely famous, he's really #1, compared the Flemish to the Palestinian, and of course the Francophone to the Israeli. There's a clear implication. Don't they try to steal, to colonize the Brussels periphery, as Israel do in Jerusalem? And this is exactly what he said. Of course, the Wallonians didn't share this Flemish vision. For them, the real Palestinians are the Francophone. The Flemish playing in the editorial the role of the cruel Israeli. It was really a feeling, of belonging part of this conflict. It's very strange, fascinating, I would say. So Palestine has risen to the status of a veritable, if it's English, civic religion. Thus, and I'm going to my conclusion already, thus anti-Zionism should